It's important for me to make a correction here. I am not the first black member of parliament. We had Lincoln Alexander, who was the first black man to enter the Parliament of Canada with the Conservative Party. And then we had Dr. Howard McCurdy, New Democratic Party. So these were two men who were back in the 80s in the Parliament of Canada. By the time I entered, 1993, I became the first black woman, and these two black men were long gone. So just, you're correct, except say woman, first black woman, and therefore I became the first black woman, everything else, right? Like in the cabinet of Canada, the first black woman to be a minister, the first black woman to be deputy speaker in the chair, etc., etc. Woman. So it's my honor to present to you the second panel, International Trade and Economic Growth in Africa, Attracting Global Investments. The two presenters you had before, Minister Fideli, as well as President Govan Ferran, brought you some facts that I think are important ones for consideration, and I hope that you wrote those numbers down, because it makes it easier as we go into this discussion talking about investments in Africa. My challenge today is really to be part of, or to moderate this panel with two of the panelists on Zoom. And so, the head of our technical petroleum is in Qatar, Adenkule Akintayo.
My pleasure.
Well, welcome from Qatar. I wonder what time it is there now. The Honorable Emilia Kayambadi, Senior Presidential Advisor on Trade and Industry, the Republic of Uganda.
Yeah, good Chairperson, and good evening, friends of Africa. I'm unable to be there today, but I salute all of you.
Thank you so much. And with us also is Professor Komian Cedro, the Dean of the School of Business, University of Quebec in Montreal. Would you join us at the table? And His Excellency Anselm Ransford Sowa, the Ambassador of Ghana to Canada. Please join. Welcome. And because we're running a little bit behind, I will go directly to the questions, and you'll have a minute each to answer the questions. They were circulated, I think, before, so you should not be unaware of what I was going to ask. So our first question, how can African nations create a more attractive investment climate to encourage global investors to allocate their capital towards the continent's economic development? And I'd like to start then with those in the room. I'd like to start with you, Professor Komian Cedro.
Microphone work, but anyway, okay, that's okay. First of all, I think that we should remember, or we should understand, that investors, whether locally or internationally, hate risk and even more uncertainties. And to create an attractive environment, I think government or countries should do whatever it takes to reduce uncertainties. And how to do to reduce uncertainties is to provide stable political environment. And information also is the key. We know all that, but we should keep the first things is to reduce uncertainties. Political uncertainties, provide information, combat corruption, and it's what they have to do always. And whatever you can, we have the indicators, we have all those, and all those are already known. But keep in mind, before being dean, I was finance professor. So uncertainties is what every investor do not like. Thank you.
Thank you for this. If I can get my mic going, yes. Thank you for this. And now we'll go to one of our Zoom, panelists on the Zoom. Maybe we can go to Qatar, Mr. Akintayo.
The internal rate of return, 10 to 15%, which will attract people in. The problem why people are not bringing that money in is because of the high risk levels. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, we're focusing on a more attractive investment climate to encourage investors. So we'll go now and see what the situation is with Ghana and ask the Ambassador Anselm to speak to that issue.
Thank you very much. I really think that no one is going to invest in Africa who doesn't recognize the marketplace of Africa. For somebody to invest in Africa, they would need to feel comfortable with the environment. And how do we create that environment? It's through organization. We need to organize ourselves properly in order to make the environment attractive, not only to outside investors, but to local investors. And once we do that, I believe we can get people interested in investing their monies in Africa. Thank you.
And the view from the Republic of Uganda, Madame Emilia.
Well, I'll give about 4 reasons, and I'll be very brief. First of all, infrastructure developments. We need nations, African nations have to work on the infrastructure development, looking at the rail, ICT for connectivity, but also better roads. We need to look at the policies, favorable policies, with a legal framework that would support or defend investors in case of any disputes. We need to look at the database, because if I'm coming to invest in your country, there should be database to show what commodities you have, and which particular commodities I should invest in. And then, of course, subscribing to different economic blocks so that when they are coming in to invest with us, they are able to go through these blocks. For example, that was one, which is the African Continental Free Trade Area. Then we have East African Community, ECOWAS, and all those. Those are very important blocks to enable these investors to channel their investments through them, but also to create links with the African nations. Those are my issues, but also skilling is very important. Massive skilling of manpower so that they are employable. When these investors come into the country, they are able to employ our skilled manpower. Those are the key factors.
To a second question, and that is around the financing and supporting of critical infrastructure projects in Africa. Those projects which are essential to trade and economic growth. And what role can investors play in this? So maybe we can start again with you, Professor.
That's true that I just forgot, but infrastructure also is part of investment climate. So now is what role? Sometime when I look at some questions, I was just wondering if there should be African countries to take their own responsibilities and create those environments, or to look at foreign investor, global investor, to do that for them. I think, first of all, that they should take care of themselves. I will say that for some other questions. But actually, because the financing tools, like I said before, are known, direct investment, public and private partnership. But first of all, they should try to reduce uncertainties, political instabilities, corruption. And so after that, I think that investors are looking for higher returns, for lower risk, for lower uncertainties. So that's the first thing to create, to attract global investors. And by looking for their own interests, they will do whatever it takes to reduce costs. Like infrastructure will help reduce costs, will help promote trades, and so on. So there is a balance of the countries taking care of themselves and attracting investors and promoting information also, because you don't invest in what you don't know even exists. The minister just said that Africans have more people under the age of 25 or 20s. I don't, but also, so the opportunities are there, but we have to create those investment climate so to attract investors looking for their higher returns. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'll ask Mr. Akintayo. Mr. Akintayo,
okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
For me, actually, there's a lot of infrastructural work that is going on in Africa. Actually, recently, like you probably are aware, Ethiopia is building the Great Renaissance Dam at the moment. In Congo, they're doing the Inga Dam. If you go to Nigeria, the last government built over 80 major roads. In the city of Lagos, as we speak today, they're doing 3 rail systems. There's a blue metro rail line, there's a red metro rail line, there's a Lagos-Ibadan rail line. If you go to Egypt, Egypt is building a brand new capital city. So there's a lot of investment, infrastructural work that is going on in Africa. The problem is that the West is missing out. And the West is missing out. Canada, US, UK, a lot of this, the Western society is missing out. All of these things are being financed by China because people in the West have set unnecessary terms of doing business. It's as simple as that, actually. Go back to the 50s or 60s. If anybody wanted to do anything in Africa, the first people that will come to see is that you come to the West and ask for money. You ask for funding. When the Egyptians wanted to build the Aswan Dam, they came to the US. The problem now is that those numbers are not there. And the reason those numbers are not there is that they are very unrealistically high levels of expectations being put out. Recently, somebody was doing a comparison of what the numbers are for an African state to borrow money from China versus what it is to borrow from the US. Typically, what you will find today is that as much as people like to complain about the Chinese, you've got 6%, 7% interest rate, whereas some of our Western partners, who are the traditional African Western partners, are charging us as much as 23%. The argument that we have there is because people are saying, well, Africa is risky. The truth is, Africa has always been risky. If people are going to build infrastructure, it's not possible to do business without taking some level of risk. And I think I'll come back to what I said at the beginning. There's a lot of infrastructure work that is going on in Africa, actually, a lot. It's just that our Western partners are missing out at the moment. And I understand that they're saying they're missing out because of the risk, but the truth of the matter is that those things can be managed. If you're going to do business with someone, you need to also be able to understand and trust them enough to manage the work. So I think there's a lot to be said about partnerships. There's a lot to be said about trust. I mean, the list of projects, major projects which are going on is unbelievable. There's a pipeline now that is being built from Nigeria to Morocco, the AKK line to bring gas to Europe in the absence of the Russian gas. There's an hydrogen plant that they're building in Namibia by Hyphon. It's a $10 billion job. So the jobs are going on. The problem is that our Western partners are in fact missing out. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you also for talking about what is on stream right now. And so I'll go then and ask Honorable Emilia
Yes.
from the Republic of Uganda, how can trade agreements and partnerships between African countries and global investors be structured to maximize economic growth opportunities while ensuring mutual benefits?
Thank you very, very much. First of all, we have to look at mutually beneficial trading terms between both parties in order to have a comprehensive partnership. Secondly, we have to merge our agreements with the existing agreements that are there. For example, if the global investors are coming in with their agreements, they should merge them with what we have. For example, African Continental Free Trade Area, or even the economic blocks. Thirdly, harmonizing policies. We have a lot of policies that we need to harmonize. For example, standards, because once we have policies and standards, at least we should harmonize them with our trading partners so that if I transport my goods from Uganda, I'm able to take them to a country with a multilateral agreement. So harmonizing policies is very important. Enforcement of these policies, sometimes we have all these policies, but enforcement is a problem. But once we enforce them, let us also publicize them, let people know. Let us be transparent about it so that people know what policies are there or trade agreements that we have. So basically, those are the key issues that would consolidate our trade agreements and partnerships between African countries and global investors. but also construction. For example, our partners have been building one-stop border posts through under a consortium of Trademark East Africa. Trademark East Africa comprises of several countries, for example, several European countries, Sweden, UK, France, different countries that have come together to support our one-stop border post so that cross-border trade could flow across. So those are some of the arrangements that we need to harmonize so that they are mutually beneficial to all of us. I thank you for that.
Well, thank you for that, because I think what you have underscored is that the regimes, the business environment and what might be different from country to country. Oftentimes we say Africa in a general sense as though every country has the same rules, has the same regimes for investors, etc. And so I'll ask the question again to our ambassador for Ghana, and the question is, how can trade agreements and partnerships between African countries and global investors be structured to maximize economic growth opportunities so that there is kind of mutual benefits for the investor, for the African country?
Okay. I will answer this question based on my previous experience as a banker. And I want to say that when you have trade agreements and you do not have banking systems in place, you have a problem. Most of the Western countries are not willing to have correspondent banking relationships with African institutions. And that creates a problem. The Chinese are willing to have, the Southeast Asians are willing to have, and it makes life a lot easier when you have banking intermediaries, to supervise these trade agreements. And that is one of the things I think is very important for the Western nations to look at. Because previously they used to show an interest in whatever they did with Africa, dealing with banks and so on. But recently they have pulled back, and they wonder why the Chinese are in the ascendancy. The Chinese are in the ascendancy because they are willing to deal properly across the table. I understand that an investor wants a country to be similar to his, to minimize his or her risk. But they've also got to reach out and meet people halfway in order for there to be a proper agreement so that we can have mutual benefits. Thank you.
Understandably. Our next question, and I'm moving on, and I'm reading the question exactly as we sent them out so that I can keep the conversation flowing and we can see where that discussion in terms of international trade and economic growth and investors, global investors, lie. So next question speaks to what strategies can global investors adapt to promote sustainable and responsible investments in Africa that generate economic growth and benefit local communities and the environment. And notice that this question is stuck in the concept of the environment and how, as we deal as global investors and work with different African countries, how do we take all of the environmental issues into consideration? So can I start then with you, Professor?
Let me me say that there is a broader trend toward ESG investment. So, and we have the UN criteria. So I will say that they should include those criteria in their investment decision process, generally speaking. But apart from that, I think that they could also partner with local businesses to improve the social impact investing, to improve the impact of the investment on the local communities. So what I would say, if they include the ESG criteria that are already known and partner with local businesses, they could more handle the community's needs where they are investing. Thank you.
And I turn the question now also to you, Honorable Emilia, from Uganda.
Yes. Well, the main strategies that global investors should adopt to promote sustainable and responsible investments in Africa is to ensure that they form consortiums whereby the indigenous nationalities also are involved. That actually plays to the previous response of partnering with local business players. Two, skills and knowledge. There could be exchange of youth, especially in the academia. It is important to bring the academia on board so that there is exchange flow of manpower. And this would help people who come from the investors to come and learn about the culture, learn about the way of doing business in Africa. But then also ours would know what should be appreciated when they're doing business with the locals. With the investors. Commercial courts are also very important for dispute management, but also for confidence building amongst the investors. So that is also another strategy we should adopt. Ensuring insurance companies to insure properties, to insure goods and services is also another key factor that one would give confidence to the global investors to invest in Africa, but also generate growth and involve local partnerships. Talking about investing in Africa, Africa is mainly an has agriculture-based economies. Let us look at value addition, industrialization. That is more sustainable when you go into industrialization rather than going into trade. So supporting and mechanizing and empowering farmers to be able for them to produce what you are going to industrialize in order to have sustainable growth. Of course, skilling is key. I rest my case. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that. And the next question has been answered somehow by the ambassador of Ghana, Excellency Anselm. But I'll ask the question because it goes directly to the points that we would like to have registered. What mechanisms and tools are available to global investors to mitigate their risks associated with investing in African markets? And we're talking about things like political instability, currency instability, etc. So what mechanisms and tools can mitigate those risks? So can I start with you then? In Qatar, since again, you are head of technical petroleum and you are engaged in that work with African countries. Can you talk then about strategies? Can you talk about mechanisms and tools to mitigate risk for investors?
it's a very, very good question. You recall that at the start of our discussion tonight, we have said that at the heart of the lack of investment in Africa, the key issue is the issue of risk, and is the issue of political risk particularly. Just to buttress the point, I'll give you a very quick example to start with. If you go onto the web now and look at the amount of money of airlines which is trapped around the world today, yeah, by airlines putting their money and not being able to repatriate them from countries, what you will find is that there's about $2.3 billion that is trapped around the globe. Out of that $2.3 billion, about 800 million of it is trapped in Nigeria alone, which represents about 40% of the global output. The second country on that list is Algeria. So between Nigeria and Algeria, two African countries, almost half of the money that you cannot get out, that airlines cannot get out of their countries where they make business, is trapped in two African countries. So the risk is real. There's no question about it. The risk is real to investors going to do business. Just the other day, they were saying that even between us as Africans, the investment of South Africa has reduced by 80% in Nigeria over the last 4 years. So the risk is real. If you go to Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, obviously we are seeing the risk. We're seeing all the risk in all of these countries, political risk coming up. But again, like I would say, this risk has not really been different from what it was in the 60s or in the 70s. The important thing is that if an investor is going into any of these countries to do business, you have to do first an international risk assessment. It's important that you do a risk assessment. This is number one. Number two, there are countries, there are insurance firms, there are organizations that help you, protect you against this kind of risk. There's something, for example, in construction that we call CAR, carry all risk, yeah, which you can insure against. And if you're putting a $10 billion investment somewhere in Africa, you can have a car that covers you for that entire amount. So first thing is that you must do an assessment. Number two is that you must take the necessary insurance to be able to mitigate against that risk. The third thing that people also need to do is to ensure that their legal T's and C's are covered appropriately. How do I mean? What it means is that if you're going to do business, you must at least know where the country of the adjudication in the event that there's a problem is. Both of you should be able to agree on that successfully and make up and ensure that you have a very good agreement on where you're going to have your adjudication. I'll give you a quick example. I was recently involved in a contract somewhere in South Korea between a Norwegian company and a South Korean company. The Norwegian company ensured that the adjudication of their business, if there was any problem, was in London. Now, there are many centers around the world, in Dubai, in Houston, in London, where you can have arbitration. But these guys ensured that the arbitration was in London. So when they ran into a problem, they were not susceptible to a risk in South Korea. All they had to do was to ensure that they put the arbitration into London and get something of an international law. And that's another thing that investors have to keep in mind. So 3 things I've said there. Number 1, carry out your own political risk assessment. Number 2, ensure that you have the insurance done properly. And number 3, pick correctly the location of your arbitration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Those are really good points. Professor, do you want to make any comments?
I think that all have been said already, and let me say that they can also, the currency risk that we are talking about, there is a lot of tools in financial market to hedge against currency risk. But actually, I think that they should use those kind of tools to manage risk. But we are talking about risk, but it's also, that is also what we can say is perceived risk, because some African countries are not risky. that local do not perceive this risk, but foreigners perceive this risk. So we should also provide a lot of information and promote the country and try to reduce uncertainties. Thank you.
Okay. And Ambassador, the issue of mitigating risk, things like political instability, currency, what's the word I'm looking for? And ensuring that investors understand the climate in which they will be investing and the risk that they could be subjected to.
Okay. What I want to say is that the world is changing. Investors, especially from the global community, need to understand that the terms on which they deal with Africa are certainly changing, and they have to recognize that we now live in a global village where people will not allow you to cheat them. You know, people want you to deal with them fairly. Now, we talk about risk as if risk is only in the global village. But Africa is risky. But China manages to invest in Africa. So how do they do it? What is it that China has that the West doesn't have? We've got to ask that question because everything seems to be going towards China and nothing coming to the West. So it is the West which is refusing to recognize that in spite of their perceived risks, there are opportunities. Yes, there are risks. How does the world help to resolve these risks? It's very difficult to talk about political risk, about currency risk, and so on, if we are going to keep the same system. If we're going to keep the same system of dealing with each other, then we have a problem. We've got to change how we deal with each other. We've got to recognize that to use a phrase, Africa has come of age, and therefore will no longer accept to be treated as a child. Thank you.
Great responses. Let me then, before I turn it over to the audience, I would like to this question to be answered. How can global investors facilitate technology and knowledge transfer to African economies to enhance their competitiveness and drive economic growth? So you mentioned the issue of we're in a global village, everything is global now. So can we go down that route talking about facilitating technology and knowledge? Professor, would you guide us along that route?
Let me thank you, Ambassador, for the previous question, because we have done some research study some years before and asked people to evaluate country risk. So we asked foreigners to evaluate country risk, and we asked the local to evaluate their own perceived risk. And the risk by locals are much lower than what foreign students are thinking about Africa. So I very like your answer. And Africa, I don't think that is that risky. To answer the last question, I will say that I'm not sure about, apart from some philanthropic duties, that there are some foreigners that will transfer technology. But that being said, I think that to be able to use technology, our countries should develop education to enhance capacity building. Because you cannot use a technology you don't know about. So the first duty is about the country themselves to be able to learn those technologies. And then, but if those global investors want to transfer the technology, I think that they could, education, pardon me, education, and that they should have some collaboration with local companies, collaboration with universities, create create some incubators, and so on. So they will promote or educate people to be able to use those new technologies. But things are improving, and it's my hope that in the future there will be some more innovation in Africa, like we are talking about Kenya or so on and so on. Thank you.
Okay, Honorable Emilia, what's going on in the Republic of Uganda around the issue of technology and investors being able to transport technology?
Yes, I'd like to thank you very much, but I'd like to raise a point whereby that as much as investors are faced with risks in investing in Africa, the African economies also have risks in investing with global investors. For example, I can cite a few cases. For example, repatriation of the proceeds. Once the investors come to Uganda, sometimes all the proceeds are repatriated. Export of raw materials. Sometimes they don't want to introduce that technology to process raw materials. I want to cite an example of coffee. It has taken us a number of years for us to get modern technology to process coffee because of competition. So there is the cartels also that have rivalry between African nations, but also the global investors. However, but also diversion sometimes of, instead of bringing in modern technology, sometimes they bring in mediocre technology. So we need to find a middle ground. What do we want from the investors? Or what do investors want from us? And all this should be stipulated in the agreements that we make between both parties, so that we stop also exporting raw materials. Because sometimes they come to us and say, we have come to invest, but they want to take out raw materials instead of processing them from here. So we have to have a mutual ground whereby we agree that, okay, you're coming to invest here. Bring in your technology, skill my people, and I think that is what we should look for, a mutual ground between us. That is a point I wanted to bring out, that the risks are on both sides, with us as Africa to invest with the global partners, but also the global partners investing in Africa. I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think we'll give the last word then to Mr. Akintayo in Qatar.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. I think the final point I'm going to make, I think the technology one is, again, a very good example. Ultimately, what we need to do is to ask ourselves, what are the countries which are successful at this? How did they do it? I'll give a very quick example. Per capita, a country like the State of Israel is light years ahead of most countries in terms of technology. Yeah. Recently, as an example, Google Maps bought Waze. It's an app for driving. They bought Waze from the State of Israel for $26 billion. That is a lot of money for one app. But the only reason that is possible is that that country as itself has incubator hubs for technology. And those incubator hubs are created by themselves. It wasn't actually done by foreigners. The state of Israel actually gets their army, their armed forces, to create technology hubs all over the country. People get involved with it, and then they fund the ones which are most successful and take it to the next level. So actually, it's good for investors to come, fine. But actually, we don't need investors to do everything. We as Africans can also do a little on our own, actually. We can do a little on our own. We don't need investors to do everything all the time. Madam Amelia mentioned about the agreements. The previous speaker, the ambassador for Ghana, talked about the changing mindset. There are so many things that we can do on our own without having investors. And I don't say this to disparage our investors. I say this because investors will come to us with a new mindset if we have the basics done. If we have a platform, a minimum standard that we have created. So we as a people first also have to create the minimum standards in our university, in our armed forces, in our organizations to say, okay, these are the things we want to do. Those technologies are easy. We will fund them. We will have incubators. We will have science parks. And then once we have done that, other people will find it easier to come and partner with us. So my final word is to the African countries themselves. For us to be able to attract the best investors, we need to do our own minimum work first. We have not done that so far. Thank you.
Merci. I think you've had excellent, the presenters have given you excellent words for thought. And it's important now that we hear from you. If you have any question or comment, we might be able to take a few. If somebody's giving me the signal as to how much time we have left and how many questions we can have, the light is definitely on our faces, so I can't really see the room. 2 minutes of questions, okay. All right, if you can make your question a question and keep the comments down, we'd appreciate that. So I see a hand right at the table in front of us here.
Thank you very much. My name is the Prophet Daniel Asamoah-Labi from the Worldwide Council of the Prophetic Alliance. I'm present to my ambassador because I'm from Ghana. We're talking about technology. Thank you very much. I'll repeat again. My name is the Prophet Daniel Asamoah-Labi from the Worldwide Council of the Prophetic Alliances. Thank you very much. And I just want to ask a question to my ambassador from Ghana because I'm from Ghana. We're talking about technology. And what the other man was saying, the honorable man is saying, is that we can also do something for ourselves and not 100% depend on the investor. I look down to Ghana and we realize that Ghana is really blessed. My question is, we have a very astute man in Ghana called Apostle Honorable Kojo Safo from the Kantanka Group. This man is able to manufacture a car from an engine from an anthill. He has manufactured a lot, even plane, doing a lot of things in Ghana. So many presidents has come first, second, third, and they all go to his functions when he's doing exhibition, and they are all happy. And even he does cars, military cars, for our military to test it, and they come out to say, it's good. Why is it that up to now, the man has not been sitting down with the government to invest? He has a school that he trains young guys, but he needs capital investment and support from the state. Up to now, we are not seeing anything. So this is my question. Why are we not using him? Thank you.
I beg to differ. I would have you know that the Minister of Finance drives a Kantanka car and goes everywhere with it. He has refused to drive a Land Cruiser. He has refused to drive any other car than a Kantanka. it is a start. There are several other people driving cantankers in our country. It is always a start. If you do recall, I don't know your age, but if you do recall, when the Japanese started producing cars, okay, people were laughing at their cars. And today, look at the Japanese. So it takes time. It will work its way into the system. It will get to a point where people will begin to look for Kantanka for guidance. Rest assured. Thank you.
Good. And those of us who didn't know about Katanka cars know about them now. Another question over on this side. Yes, sir. Behind you there, yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the fine members of the panel. You made amazing opportunities to make points, and I just want to add my own brief question. So as a diaspora of Ghana specifically, and I want to have this question directed to everyone on the panel and brief forward. As diaspora, I believe, especially in the West, we are the ones who have the opportunity to understand what that low perceived risk actually is on the continent. So based off of that understanding and our opportunity to develop consortiums, just as the fine honorable minister from Uganda has said, to have actual human capital be channeled through to the continent, this is where my forward is for my question. How can the government facilitate more inclusive and transparent procurement practices to ensure fair opportunities for both local and diaspora business? So that's my question for you. And an example of that is, of course, how can we develop value addition to critical infrastructure? And that could be in various segments, such as mining with lithium. How can we add value addition? And various different opportunities in terms of actual infrastructure development to enable foreign direct investment from other counterparts, but through the diaspora lens. What are we doing?
Okay, anyone want to take this question?
Let this question first to the ambassador.
Ambassador, you're working for your money today.
Okay. Thank you for that question. It's got to be stumped, but I'll take a stab at it. Now, you're talking about getting foreign direct investment from the diaspora. The diaspora has to be in a position to do that. I used to be a diasporan from the United Kingdom, and it's difficult to look after yourself, much less going to invest in your country in a big way. What I believe the African countries need from their diasporans is the contacts that they have, and the relationships that they form with people in the West, which would enable foreign direct investment to flow through. For example, one of the important things that I've seen happening of late, which I think is in a very good direction, is the relationship between Africa and the Caribbean countries seems to be improving so much, that very soon it will be a force to reckon with. And that, I think, is the future of foreign direct investment. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have exhausted our 2 minutes. Is there a pressing question out there? Can you see? Okay, go ahead.
I know it's difficult for a diaspora to make a big impact, but there are small things I think that we can do to further that type of skills development and innovation in countries. And for example, there's a conference called Tech Connect Africa, and they have a session happening in Ghana in December. We're going to be taking part in that, but it's also in Nigeria, in Kenya, and South Africa. And what we're looking to do is how can we know we have skills that we need for businesses here in Canada, specifically in BC, and how can we use the skills and tech, the smarts that are in African people, in Africa, how can we use that and translate it to being able to meet the needs of the businesses over here while supporting young and upcoming tech entrepreneurs in Africa. And our conversations that we've had in the last couple of weeks with Citizenship Immigration Canada, which is how can we use immigration to support the skills development needs of Canadian businesses. And I think that's one of the ways, is the small ways that we can impact. Is we know that that Africa has the youngest population over the coming years, and that is going to be breeding innovation and skills that we can use as diasporan businesses here. So how do we make those connections? And I think the Honorable Minister from Ghana mentioned that. It's connections. How do we connect businesses here with the skills of the African countries? And how can we also transfer that knowledge of skills that we have on this side to the African businesses? So I just wanted to input that a little bit.
Okay, so I'll take that not so much as a question, but as a comment with some really very positive input. But you can speak to that? Or you'll speak, yes. We'll speak one-on-one. And also, our president is also, Friends of Africa. This is always a discussion as to the involvement of the diaspora in the African situations. I want to take this opportunity now to say how impressed I am by this panel and the information that was provided to us this morning has been so rich. I also want to thank the tech people that we were able to bring Qatar and Uganda in with such facility. And I want to say that the audience has been a most receptive one, and the individuals, Professor and Ambassador, are going to be around, and if there is any comment that you would like to further discuss with them, that would be agreeable. And also with the Madam President, board members and others who are here would also be happy to continue to engage you. I thank you for the honor of chairing this panel.
Okay.